So Alison, is this where the students prepare the food for the worms?
Yes, it is. The Year Sixes are here prepping their food ready to go to feed the worm farms. They're just chopping them up into nice small little bits and then they will go and feed the worms.
Some schools choose to use a blender. Other schools use a bucket and spade to chop up fruit and veg scraps before feeding the worms. And how often do the students carry out the task of food collection to feed the worms? And is there some sort of roster system?
Yes, there is a roster system. They partake in this 8-week process. So after 8 weeks, they move on to another Year 6 leadership activity and we get a new group come in. Collecting the worm buckets, the students within the classroom collect the worm food every day, but the Year 6s come along every week and pick it up.
Can you tell me what you're preparing to feed the worms?
Yeah, a lot of the time we get things like banana peels and apples, and sometimes we'll get treats for the worms like watermelon, and we make sure we cut that up smaller so they can eat it faster.
Yeah, nice. So you're taking care of them.
Yeah.
I love it. What are you cutting over there? Apple. It's cutting an apple, banana. We're working together.
Yes.
Worms eat the equivalent of their own body weight in food every 2 to 3 days. So if you have 3 kilograms of worms, then you can add approximately 3 kilograms of food every other day. Worms love most fruit and vegetables, old coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, and even newspaper and shredded paper towels. But they don't like citrus, tomatoes and onions, dairy products, greasy foods, bread and pasta, meat and garden waste. So keep these out. These kids are doing a great job. Is there any other maintenance involved?
Yes, the worms also need some paper, so we have a bucket next to the worm farm which has shredded paper in it, and the children use that to help keep the worms fed.
Fruit and vegetable scraps are a rich source of nitrogen, so adding a carbon source such as shredded newspaper, straw or autumn leaf litter will keep the worms happy and the environment balanced. Use something that is easy for you to obtain. Sometimes grit can be added to the worm farm to help break up the particles. Like birds, worms have no teeth, but instead a gizzard. A gizzard needs grit to help break up the food. This can be added in the form of sand or crushed eggshells, about a handful every other time the worms are fed. Can you please explain how you collect the liquid fertiliser that you mentioned earlier?
Well, what happens is there's a bucket placed underneath an opening of the worm farm, so the liquid goes into that, and then weekly the students will sieve it into the recyclable containers that we have collected throughout the school, and then we lock it away in the storeroom ready for marketing.
Watering a worm farm is only necessary if it appears a bit dry. As worms breathe through their skin, keeping the bedding material moist is important, but it is also important not to overwater the farm. To test the moisture content, simply take a handful of castings and squeeze it. If you get a few drops of water, this is ideal. The bottled liquid is capped and stored only for a short period of time before being sold to the parents. Do not store for longer than 24 hours as the liquid contains living bacteria that will die without oxygen. For the liquid to be a beneficial fertiliser, it needs to be used as soon as possible. I'm here with the principal of Boyer Primary School, Nicole. How you doing, Nicole?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
That's good to hear. And so what's happening here right now?
Well, they're actually creating labels for their worm whiz.
Oh, cool. So this is so that they can sell it to the community?
Yeah, so quite frequently we have our assemblies and the students are outside selling it to everybody.
And as a principal, what are the benefits of worm farming for your school?
Well, there's a lot of benefits for us, particularly with being able to reduce waste. It also ticks a lot of boxes for us in terms of the learning areas. So our cross-curriculum priority of sustainability is certainly the big one here.
So Alison, what's happening back here?
Well, the students are looking at worms through the magnifying glasses. It's fantastic to have a worm farm on school grounds. It gives them the opportunity to look at a living creature.
Well, it looks like they're having a great time.
It certainly does.
Looking at them through the magnifying glass is cool when you dig around, because once you go deeper, you can find a lot more of the worms and you kind of just find piles of them. And they look really cool when they're all together, and they look really nice with the segments of the worms.
What do you like about looking at the worms through the magnifying glasses?
I like looking at the features of the worms and how they move.
Do you want to look at the worm through the magnifying glass? Tell me what you see.
Yes.
There you go. Education about worms and organic waste can be easily integrated into the curriculum using the resources available on our website. So besides the leachate, you can also use the worm castings in the garden?
Yes, you can. The worm castings are fantastic for the gardens. When our worm farm is about 3/4 full, we empty it and then we either use it in our own garden at school or we bag it up and sell it to our school community. The worm castings can also be used to make worm tea.
Worm tea.
Worm tea.
To make worm tea, you first need to remove the chlorine from the tap water. Simply fill a tub and leave it exposed to the sun for 24 hours. The chlorine will evaporate. Then transport the dechlorinated water to another tub placed near a power source. Add a few handfuls of castings to a porous bag and place the bag suspended in the water. You will need a fish tank pump to aerate the water. Place the hoses in the water and turn the pump on. Add 2 to 3 tablespoons of molasses to the mix to feed the beneficial bacteria. Leave the mix for 24 hours. Then it can be used directly on plants in the food garden or put in a labelled bottle to be sold within 48 hours. It's a great fertiliser containing large numbers of beneficial microbes. How do you remove the castings from the worm farm?
So what happens is the food is placed in a different area, so the worms will then wiggle their way towards where the new food is, and then we remove the castings from where they've been.
Castings can also be removed and placed in small piles on a large tarp. Students then carefully scrape away the surface layer of each pile and put it to the side. As a layer of castings is removed, this exposes the worms beneath. The worms do not like the light, so they bury themselves deeper. Students then continue to scrape away another layer of castings until only the worms remain. The worms can then be returned to the worm farm. How often do you empty the castings from the worm farm?
The castings are emptied approximately every 3 to 6 months.
And how often do you make the worm tea you were speaking about?
The worm tea about 3 to 4 weeks, depending if the plants need a nutrient boost.